The house ghost was me. The night before Thanksgiving, the first took a picture. Even the sound of the plate breaking escapes my memory. All I can recall is the heavy, oppressive silence that followed, like if the house itself were holding its breath. The evening before Thanksgiving was the date. I was 55 years old, with sweat clinging to my back and elbows deep in dough, when all of a sudden, I lost my temper. In the center of the kitchen where I had worked for 30 years, I started cooking at 5 in the morning. 16 dishes. No pauses. No assistance. No thanks at all. And the time I at last snapped? What a mug, with a honey container. In her own right, my mother-in-law, Marjorie, walked in like she owned the place, picked up her mug, and requested warm lemon water with honey. Not if you have a moment. Not please. Simply say, "Get me some honey," I responded. "It's in the basket under the cabinet," without raising my eyes from the dough. Simply stoop and seize it. Be calm, not impolite, simply exhausted. However, royalty didn't think that was good enough. She yelled, "You know my back is bad. And you still want me to stoop? Are you thoughtful?" That was the beginning of it. My ribs were under pressure. That heated knot in my chest familiar. "Maybe skip the honey then," I mumbled. "You shouldn't throw your back out." The cup exploded when she slammed it into the sink. There are pieces of porcelain all over. Along with it, something inside of me broke. At last, Carl and Evan came out of the living room. I suppose their cocoon of YouTube and football was eventually broken by all the shouting and broken tile. I had the fleeting impression that they might inquire about my well-being. They might tell Marjorie to move away, that I was overdoing it, that I appeared worn out, that I was noticed. Not at all. Carl entered, glanced at the shattered mug, and scoffed. "What the devil is wrong with you, Abigail? You're forcing your elderly mother-in-law to go out of her way to get something? Are you heartless?" I remained motionless. I'm still half-crouched, with chicken juice by my feet and flour on my hands. Evan added without raising his head from his phone. "Yes, Mother. Really. It was only honey. Grandma isn't feeling well. You had the opportunity to assist." He spoke in a bland tone, dismissive. He then included the portion that truly made me shudder. "Why must you make this place feel like a soap opera at all times?" The dagger then appeared. Aunt Linda looks put together while working full-time, caring for the children, and maintaining a clean home. Each and every day, you act as though the entire world is owed to you, dressed as though you gave up a decade ago. I remained silent. I was unable to. I simply gazed at the tile fissures, the floor, and the faint gleam of turkey fat beneath my feet. As if I were the danger, Evan led Marjorie out of the kitchen, and he grabbed my brand new apron, the one I had saved for, and threw it on the ground like a rag just before he left, to prevent Marjorie from slipping. Carl placed his customary cherry on top a little later. "You definitely need to examine yourself closely. It was meant to be a joyous holiday. Now observe the atmosphere you have established." I was there, still squatting on the ground, hands smeared with turkey rub and flour. I kept cutting my fingers open while attempting to pick up ceramic fragments. One by one, keep quiet, bleeding, by themselves. Still, none of them volunteered to assist. I recall seeing my reflection when I looked up at the glass cabinet door. I had my hair stuck to my cheeks. I hadn't even realized that my cheeks were moist with tears and perspiration. I appeared to be a ghost. No human, just a stove-chained object. The most depressing aspect? I didn't sit down to dine with them, and nobody even noticed. While the others giggled over the plates I had filled, I remained huddled in that kitchen corner. It wasn't that I wasn't hungry. However, I was unable to sit beside them and act like a human being in that space. It was not the first instance. I recall making too much noise during dinner time years ago while sipping soup. Carl responded, glancing at me as if I had burped in church. "The most annoying sound I've ever heard is that slurping noise, similar to chalkboard nails." I never again sat at their table to eat. They were indifferent. They didn't inquire. It was Carl's grilled chicken with quinoa every morning, Evan's toast and buttered eggs. Marjorie's oatmeal turned into a sludge after boiling. 3 burners. 3 choices. I was treated like an underpaid hotel chef by 3 individuals. And me? Just the small-town woman who married and became ensnared in a life of yes, mams, and apron strings. I experimented with side stitching, placemats, quilts, and small bags for the neighbors. Earned several $100s every month, more occasionally. However, it was only a pastime to them, a pointless diversion. Carl used to laugh and say, "You can't even handle breakfast without burning something. Apart from eating, what else are you good at?" Marjorie would immediately add, "Please don't appear so depressed in the morning. Looking at you makes me hungry already." "What about Evan?" he merely observed. His eyes were on his phone. Never uttered a word. It began to creep in. Perhaps I was the issue. Perhaps I was useless after all. Too dull of a soup. The chicken was very dry. The floor was not properly mopped. The towels were not folded correctly. Not quite enough, always. However, something changed that evening, that Thanksgiving Eve. One thought struck me so strongly that it sounded like a voice in my bones as I looked down at those broken tiles, my hands bleeding and my back screaming. What else do they want from me? 30 years. Cooking, cleaning, controlling emotions, and keeping this place together like duct tape for 30 goddamn years. Still, it wasn't sufficient. I had returned to the kitchen by the time they had finished their meal. Water was boiling over in a pot. I turned around and continued cooking after throwing the plates in the sink. 3 o'clock had passed. That's when the sickness struck. That icy, sluggish, lightheaded type that results from absolute and utter exhaustion rather than hunger. However, the supper was not finished. Someone would request more salt as soon as I sat down, or an alternative fork, or a spotless plate. God forbid I even recommend getting takeaway. I made one attempt. Only once. Carl's expression darkened. That expression of unspoken warning. He didn't have to say anything. Like weather forecasts, I had learned to discern his moods. And this one shouted, "Don't put me to the test." I bit my tongue as a result and gave a nod. I finished preparing dinner. Seldom. I had trembling hands. I had a burning sensation on my scalp. My legs are like jelly. I heard them in the living room at that point. Marjorie, seated like a queen on the leather couch. Like guardians, Carl and Evan stand on either side of her. Carl crooned, "Don't let it affect you, Mom. Abigail never had a lot of schooling. It is unrealistic to expect her to comprehend half of the time." Like a backing vocalist, Evan jumped in. "Yes, Grandma. Don't worry. She is only capable of cooking and folding clothes." Smugly, Marjorie grinned. "You ought to have wed Linda. She had culture. Not like Abigail. She lashes out when I beg for honey." Carl let out a sigh. "The biggest mistake I've ever made in my life was marrying her. That was the end of it." I refrained from crying. I didn't shout. I went straight to the refrigerator, removed my apron. I proceeded to pack my belongings. Not out of rage, with clarity, because I discovered that night that I had been living with individuals who were unaware of me. Not as a spouse, not as a mom, not as a person even. A phantom in the kitchen. What about ghosts? Thanksgiving dinner is no longer prepared by them. I left Turkey and packed my life into 2 suitcases. Packing your life while the house you've served continues to breathe behind you is strange. The identical refrigerator hums while you bundle shirts into a bag. That small wine stain from Marjorie's birthday is still present on the rug you vacuumed last week. It still creaks in the same place the upstairs passage you used to slip by when Carl was in bad moods. It feels like incorrect, like pilfering from a museum you personally constructed. Even so, you pack, because you are aware that you will talk yourself out of it if you pause, or even just sit down for a moment. I didn't hold off till the turkey had completely thawed. I ascended the steps, retrieved the 2 worn-out suitcases from the closet's rear, the ones from that 2004 beach trip when Carl last touched my hand in public. I walked quickly. Jeans, blouses, undergarments, my tiny sewing equipment. My grandma, the only person who ever taught me that leaving might occasionally be holy work, is shown in a framed picture. I forgot to bring my wedding band. It had been years since I wore it. The apron was not packed by me. I put it on the counter, smeared in resigned gravy. No note was left by me. What was there for me to say? I appreciate the emotional damage. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. In the garage was Carl. Evan was at someone's house. Marjorie was unconscious on the sofa. I passed the dining area. The silverware was shining. Perfectly positioned candles. Napkins folded swan-like. Everything is flawless. However, none of it had any significance. I couldn't bear the thought of using the front entrance, so I snuck out the back. Not after being invisible in my own house for 30 years and opening it for visitors. There was a creak in the screen door. The stone walkway struck my boots. My face was battered by a cold breeze. And then, suddenly, I was gone. I had no strategy, not really anywhere to go. Only a wounded but beating heart, a prepaid phone, and $14.78 in a savings account Carl was unaware of. I had to sit down at the bus station 2 blocks away because my hands were shaking so much. The middle of the night, freezing. At my feet are suitcases. And me, this middle-aged woman wearing a fleece jacket, gasping like if she had just finished an unfinished marathon. I refrained from crying. Not quite yet. Later on, that happened. It was 4:23 a.m. When the bus arrived, there were no inquiries from the driver, simply nodded once and assisted me in carrying the items inside. I was nearly broken by that small, unspoken act of generosity. I went to the only location that came to mind. Lydia's, my cousin. We hadn't communicated for more than a year. Not because we got into a fight, simply life. When you're embarrassed by who you've become, you stop phoning people. When you don't want your voice to sound worn out. However, Lydia, she was the silent wife, the ghost, the lady behind the roast, and one of the few people who remembered me before I became her. With a blanket around her shoulders and a bedhead, she opened the door. Didn't inquire, didn't scream. She just said, looking me in the eye, "Enter. Take a seat. Are you hungry?" I gave a nod. She prepared some soup, gave me a spoon, and then left me to eat quietly. Don't judge. No inquiries. All I had was a warm bowl and someone who could still see me. For the first 3 nights, Lydia's pull-out couch served as my bed. My dreams would leave me sweaty when I woke up. When I heard the phone ring, I balled my fists. I started eating breakfast out of instinct, before realizing I didn't have to. The mornings were peaceful. Lydia let me room and worked from home. Little post-its were left on the counter. The coffee is fresh. After 9, you have the shower. You don't cause trouble. The final one? After reading it, I cried for 20 minutes, since I was unaware that I still required such information. Evan sent me a note on the 4th day. No call. Only a text. Mom, I'm not sure what you're attempting to demonstrate. This is pitiful. Before Dad makes things worse, come home. No, how are you? No, where are you? Simply, command. Carl didn't send any messages. However, I did see the emails. The ones he sent, posing as me, to my former sewing clients. Orders are being canceled. I informed them that I was no longer accepting work. Change your passwords, Lydia remarked, observing my fury. Each and every one. At this moment, yes, I did. It was the first time I had taken an action just for my own protection in decades. And then I got going. I was unable to stop. I applied for a mailbox at the post office, created a bank account just in my name. I rebuilt my sewing website, began providing pre-made goods rather than custom work. These were little tasks I could complete on Lydia's dining table while background replays played. In the first week, I sold 3 bags. Next, 6. It wasn't really much. It was mine, though, and I grinned each time I delivered one to the post office, since I wasn't merely shipping a product. I was mailing evidence of my continued existence to the universe. The part about leaving that they don't tell you? There is more than one choice. Every day there are 100 small ones. Not picking up the phone. I'm not sorry I breathed too loudly. Not telling those who only witnessed the highlight reel why you left. Don't get back up just because someone tells you that you're being theatrical. It's challenging. It's solitary. It's uncooked. However, it is also truthful. Furthermore, I would much rather experience genuine agony than slick misery. Carl finally called 2 weeks after I had left. I didn't respond. In his voicemail, he began by saying, "Abigail, we really need to talk about the harm you're doing." I removed it before he was done, because I had already begun to write a list by that point. A list of the falsehoods I had believed. I had buried the truths, the parts of myself that I had exchanged for an unfulfilled serenity. I had not yet decided what I would do with the list. However, I was aware of one thing: I was not returning. Never. The day I began rebuilding my life and stopped apologizing. I never felt empowered when I woke up. It doesn't operate that way. Going from a ghost to a goddess takes time. When you wake up, your eyes are swollen, your joints are tight, and a voice in your head continues to ask, "Are you sure you're allowed to want more than this?" But you still get up. You prepare your own coffee, another bag that you sew. Without reading the entire message, you delete another harsh message. One day, you discover that you haven't offered an apology for your existence for weeks. That's only the start. One afternoon, Lydia found me rearranging her cupboard when she got home from work. I took a step back instantly. "I apologize, but I shouldn't be in your belongings. I was merely attempting to assist." She turned and looked at me. Not upset. Simply sad, she whispered. "You don't have to prove yourself to be here, Abby. You already merit it." I froze as well, because I had come to associate love with work somewhere along the line. Performance combined with presence. A helpful home, not being a helpful skill. However, as a requirement. Who was I if I wasn't managing, cleaning, and feeding? As it happens, I was still a person, even when motionless. Your body recalls independence more quickly than your intellect, which is crazy. I stopped flinching when someone opened a cabinet behind me after 2 weeks. After 3 weeks, I began going on walks without requesting permission. I had been sleeping with both ears clogged by the end of the month, because I didn't have to hear footsteps anymore, or changes in tone, or doors slammed. At last, my body had received the memo: "You're secure." When I checked my sewing account one afternoon, I discovered a message from a former customer. "Hello, Abigail. I adored your work, but I'm not sure what's been going on. I hope all is well with you. I would love to place another order if you ever reopen." I was completely broken by that one message, because it served as a reminder that there are individuals in the world who view me as more than just a wife or a burden, those who simply enjoyed my creations, not because they required it. However, it was valuable. That same evening, I opened my page again, posted a subdued notice, back in a tiny manner. "I appreciate your patience." At first, orders came in slowly, then gradually, then more quickly than I could complete them. I had no intention of becoming wealthy or becoming viral. However, I was spotted, and I was enough for the first time in years. Evan texted once more around that time. "You're ruining Dad's reputation. Not 'how are you, I miss you,' no. Only remorse, humiliation, and blame." I typed a response. After then, it was erased. Because I finally figured out something. He wasn't faithful out of love. Conditioning was the cause. Instead of defending the lady who made the house a home, he had been schooled to protect the man who paid the bills. His father's perspective, which judged women in servitude and silence, had been passed down to him. And perhaps, just possibly, he wasn't totally to blame for that. However, it was definitely not mine either. I began spending Wednesdays at the neighborhood community center. Not for treatment. Not quite yet. For the craft circle alone. 10 females. Varying ages. The same weary eyes. We stitched. Tea was shared. We shared stories that we didn't always complete. No one inquired about my origins. No one anticipated my spontaneous smile. However, they paid attention when I spoke. I wasn't dramatic. Not because I wanted to say something important, merely because I was present. And being seen without warning? You don't even realize you need that kind of healing until you get it. The most surprising aspect of recovery? The laughter returns. It feels strange at first, as if your throat had forgotten how to contain happiness. But it comes back, wobbly and soft. Lydia informed me one afternoon that she unintentionally sent a business email with the following subject line: FWD, a financial spreadsheet with a sexy twist. I sobbed, because I laughed so much. Not because it was funny, although it was kind of funny, but rather because I hadn't laughed so hard in a long time. And delight turns into a rebellion after you've spent enough time in survival mode. I began photographing my work, not very fancy. Only notebooks made of soft cloth, aprons, and purses. Each one was silently embroidered and purposefully completed, carrying a piece of me. I gave them straightforward names on the internet: Rise, Silent Power, Honey with Lemon. The final one? That was for me, a small joke that only I could understand, because everything was once broken open by a jar of honey. It was only thread and fabric now, reclaimed. Lydia volunteered to assist me with my small business grant application. I'm not ready, I told her. All right, she responded, nodding. However, you will be, and I'll be here when you are. That is the definition of support. Not under duress, not sympathy, simply being there. I couldn't take my eyes off a mirror I passed one morning. I had my hair tied up, no cosmetics, just peaceful eyes and a clean face. I grinned as well, not because I thought what I saw was good. However, I didn't detest it. And that was novel. Healing should feel like fire, like anger, like rebirth, like shattering things, I thought. However, for me, it was like entering a room without saying I'm sorry for being there, as if tea were preferable to stress, like going to sleep with no dreams, like actually meaning it when you laugh at a stupid email subject line. Carl's name continued to appear sometimes. Missed phone calls, voicemails that are cold. However, I stopped listening, because I was creating something lovely once more by that point. Not only pouches and quilts, however, a life. One that didn't require a man's blessing, one that didn't back down in the face of discomfort, and one that seemed like it belonged to me at last. He made an attempt to win me back, but I had already left. A letter was the first step, written by hand, on hefty paper. You would believe it held something sacred because of how meticulously it was folded. No address for return. The mail contained no apology. Simply, to Abigail, from Carl. Before I opened it, I looked at it for a while. I was standing over it like it was about to catch fire when Lydia got home from the market. She made no inquiries. Just gave me that you owe him nothing expression. She was correct. However, curiosity can be amusing, particularly when it smells of the past and is encased in guilt. I opened it then. Carl's penmanship remained the same. It's still too tidy, too methodical, as if he wanted you to be aware of his level of measurement. There were 4 pages in the letter. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately, he said. This is code for, I'm afraid people are talking because I finally noticed you're gone. He talked about how the house felt empty without me. How quiet, not in a good way, Thanksgiving was. Marjorie's journey to remain with Linda. How Evan has been acting cold and distracted lately. Then the treasure arrived. I had no idea how much you contributed to this family. Your cooking is missed. Your composure. The manner in which you kept everything together. Not to add the plate I used my own blood to wipe off the floor. The night I departed without a coat was not mentioned. Don't bring me up. Exactly what I supplied. It read like a pitch in the final paragraph. Go home. We may begin anew. Perhaps take a quick weekend getaway, just like in the past. I even made room for your sewing supplies in the closet. My sewing supplies. Like I was a kid returning from camp. As like I were a side table, and he could just make room for me. I didn't reply in writing, but he arrived a week later, in person. I noticed his automobile as I was leaving the craft store with fresh cloth. Black SUV, still immaculate, still pricey. I still smell like ego. He left as if nothing had occurred. Tucked in is the shirt, preloaded with a smile. Speak quietly, Abigail. You appear to be well rested. Rested, not powerful, not glowing. Not I missed you even. Simply put, I slept. As if I had been on a spa trip rather than recuperating from 30 years of emotional decay. I said nothing at all. I just piled my belongings into Lydia's car after walking there. Like a salesman who couldn't believe you were passing up a good deal, Carl followed. Look, I know I made a mistake, he said. But, that was difficult. My work gets, And Mom, she was a pain in the ass. Shifting the blame, traditional. The pivot then came. Evan is having difficulties. He is missing you. He expressed his yearning for you to return home to me. My chest hurt at that part. Not because I thought it was true. However, because a tiny part of me wished it were real. However, I recalled Evan's text. He referred to me as pathetic in that instance, and he used to watch Marjorie make fun of me without ever saying anything, and I recalled that stillness. I inhaled and then said, I'm not missed by you. You miss the cook, the maid, and the calm person who kept your home looking tidy. Carl's mouth clenched. Stop being dramatic. I grinned. It virtually had my name on it, because that precise phrase had been used so frequently to dismiss me. You realize what's amusing? I said. You believe that this is a difficult time. For example, I went for a walk to decompress. You believe you can wait out my season. He remained silent. I moved in closer. However, Carl, I'm not a cold front. I am the unanticipated climatic change. I then got into Lydia's vehicle, drove off, didn't turn around. That evening, I shed tears. Not because I was missing him, but because I was able to see him clearly at last. Not that Carl was a monster. He was not a bad guy. He was merely a man who fell for the myth that comfort appears to be control, and love appears to be comfort. And I had been the instrument that enabled him to feel comfortable, right up till I quit. It was quiet for the following few weeks. No letters, no trips. Just a few people we have in common checking in to see how I'm doing, which is another way of attempting to get gossip. I didn't give them anything, only courteous smiles and evasive responses, because your honesty isn't truly what people want. The version that suits their comfort level is the one they desire. Mine didn't either. I concentrated on reconstructing instead. At the weekend market, I set up a small pop-up shop, sold journals that were hand-stitched, runners for tables. The inside hems of aprons are embroidered with little daring quotes. You are not their fucking plate. Consent is not silence. Made by a departing woman, they were completely sold out. All of them. Unmarried. Time. As it happens, I wasn't the only person who had been transformed into a ghost. I still experienced cramps occasionally, particularly at night. Then there was silence in the home. I sat by myself with my tea when Lydia went to bed early. I would question, if I had departed earlier, where would I be now? If someone had told me at the age of 25, you deserve more, how would my life have turned out? However, remorse is a thief, and I had given it the keys for enough years. Right now, I was creating something new now, not flawless, not without anguish, but authentic. I didn't simply walk away. I began anew, according to my terms. Some folks anticipate a dramatic conclusion, an epic battle, a victory for the public, a microphone drop. However, what is the reality? The majority of ends are a breath, a lengthy one, from the depths of your abdomen, the kind you didn't realize you had until the pain in your chest finally goes away. That's how the day I signed the divorce papers felt. Carl did not physically appear. He got a large, chilly, stapled, and stamped envelope sent over by his lawyer. A message was attached. No animosity. Let's be polite. Civil. Like a quarrel between two neighbors over a fence line. Without blinking, I signed every page, read every word, and threw it in the return package. Not because I was emotionless, mainly because I had already grieved. You grieve for a marriage that has ended before the burial. Your husband looks at you like a stranger when you wake up. As you bleed on the kitchen floor onto a dish rag, I treated myself to a cake after finishing the paperwork. Lydia assumed I was kidding. Who wears red velvet to celebrate a divorce? She inquired. I said, someone who survived it. While watching awful reality TV, we ate it in our pajamas. I didn't even feel bad about it. I received approval for the small company grant a few weeks later. Although it wasn't much, it was sufficient. Enough to lease a small downtown storefront. Enough to purchase actual shelves, better equipment, and a placard that read, Truth and Thread Lydia and I painted the walls. On the day of opening, my sewing circle brought flowers. With her first order, a woman named Corinne slipped me a letter. It stated, My story is your story. I appreciate you sharing it in this forum. Then I sobbed in the back room. The kind of cry that is good, the sort of one that wants to let go. I took a tiny apartment above the store. Just one bedroom, flooring that creak, a window that provides the ideal amount of morning light. I occasionally sip tea while observing passers-by. Additionally, I believe, I own this. Not very large, not dazzling, but mine. Nobody is shouting. Nobody is erasing. I'm not being dramatic when I ask to be seen. Only me, as well as the sound of scissors cutting fabric, and the cadence of a life crafted from the ground up. Evan hasn't visited me yet. However, a few months ago, I did receive a message from him. Dad is dating once more. Grandma went to live full-time with Aunt Linda. I just wanted to say that I now understand. That was it. I didn't answer. Not because I have resentment. However, now that I understand the difference between someone reaching out and someone arriving, and I'll be here if and when he ever makes the decision to come. Not waiting, simply existing. Every Thursday, a certain woman visits my store. She is 60 years old, wears armor like scarves, grins as though it's painful. Soft is not weak was inscribed on the inside hem of an apron she picked up one day. After giving me a long look, she said, "Did you create this?" I gave a nod. She grinned. Her eyes, though. "I needed to hear that today," they remarked. Now, that's what I do. I incorporate reminders onto objects. Hidden inside the folds are small truths. Not for them. Really, not even for me. For the women who were still squatting on the kitchen floorboards. They're still stifling their voices. They continue to think that crumbs are affection. I once believed that survival was sufficient. The finish line was to walk away and breathe freely. However, I've learned better. The bottom is survival, the roof is living, and prospering. When you stop asking yourself, "Was I too much?" You're flourishing. "I was never too little," you begin. You wouldn't notice anything unusual about me if you were passing me on the street. Just a woman with weary eyes and a tote bag, perhaps holding fabric samples with one hand and a cappuccino in the other. However, it would be seen if you examined more closely. That silent firmness. That feeling of someone who is fully aware of who she is, because she deserved to regain every inch of herself. Therefore, no, I didn't simply walk away. I returned home. They attempted to bury the version of me in courteous compliance. To the girl who used her hands to dream. To the woman who is whole without a home. I found myself when I got home, and I'm not going anywhere else.